Probably at some of the points, having the attitude that failure isn't an option. There is times running that business that I had the attitude that failure is not an option. And what I mean by that is when we started going through some tough times, I went, and not saying this is a bad thing, but I doubled down where at the time I probably should have said, no, read the writing on the wall. And between myself, my investors and stuff, trying to get through that hump when, and I think in hindsight, the writing was on the wall, cost us all a lot more. And I think if we would have taken things at that time and said, you know what, we've got to end things here and then start it over, then it would have been a better outcome for all of us.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Founder. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Jeff Heggie. And Jeff started his founding journey. I was originally in a stone manufacturing company that started in 2005 and got shut down during COVID, and was a bank manager at the time as well. And then I was in a friend's office and saw a pamphlet on his desk and said, hey, we can figure out this industry that we know nothing about. So with no experience, dove in, opened up some offices, had some pretty big competitors, and started figuring out how to partner with them. And then moved to Arizona, did some additional acquisitions or was going to do some acquisitions that fell through during COVID, shut that down after 16 years and started focusing more heavily on the coaching business, and which is the business that is going forward today. So with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Jeff.
Hey, thanks, Devin. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I've had a lot of opportunities to have entrepreneurial experiences throughout my life. I did start out as a bank manager, got into a few different ventures. And yeah, the Stone Company was probably the biggest learning experience of all of them, obviously, because we ran it for 16 years. But with the coaching and other businesses we've been running, it's been really an interesting and rewarding journey.
Well, that's awesome. And with that as an introduction, just as a quick reminder to the audience, so Jeff has been on a couple of our sister podcasts, both The Inventive Journey and The Inventive Expert. So if you want to go check out his full journey, or you want to hear a bit more expertise from him, certainly make sure to go check out those episodes. But for today, why don't we kick things off and unpack things a bit? So you were at a stone manufacturing company. I think you started around 2005, and you were there for a number of years and was expanding and growing and kind of doing that. And then COVID kind of hit and deals fell through and things forced it to be closed. But walk us through a little bit more of that journey that kind of led up to the focusing on the coaching business.
You bet. It was really an interesting journey. Of course, nothing like I anticipated from the very beginning. That was one of the things that I learned really quick is plans change and you be adaptable to things as they happen when you start businesses. As you mentioned at the beginning, at the time I was a bank manager. My education, my major was entrepreneurship. I always knew I wanted to be doing something on my own. And I was it was a client at the time, but a friend of mine, we were in his office, he was building homes, and I saw the stone catalog on his desk, and I was looking at it, and I knew a little bit about the industry, but not very much. And I just said to him, I said, you know what, we could figure this out. We could figure out how to manufacture this artificial stone veneer and do something here. At the time, I was in Southern Alberta, living up there. And so we went all in. I resigned at the bank and walked away and said, I'm going to go make rock. And I found someone in Missouri that trained me on how to do it, which I remember leaving there thinking, you know what, this was a lot easier than I anticipated. I thought this was going to be a hard process. I had my eyes open once we tried it. It seemed easy when I was watching the pros do it, but it took a lot of work to really figure it out. Took a lot of mentors and obviously great employees, but we got that running, started in Southern Alberta, opened a second factory in Springville, Utah. And there was a lot of things, 2008 hit right as we were going through a big expansion, and all of a sudden it seemed like overnight things just changed on us, and so we had to adapt. And so there's a lot of times we had to really pivot and change things and change how we were doing things. As you mentioned as well, we had some big competitors. We were competing against the Owens Corning, the Eldorado Stone, Cultured Stone, all the big companies, and we had to really find our niche that we could do something different. And so one of the things we did, we had a bunch of dealers spread around, but we also started to operate our own retail stores. And when we did that, I really thought, if someone comes in and looks at our product, we obviously want them to buy our product, but if it's not the right fit, I don't want them to leave. And so I started negotiating with some of our competitors saying, you know what, we want to sell your product. And it took a while to get to that level of trust that I wasn't trying to pull something on them and develop a relationship with them. But it ended up being really good because people could come into our stores and we had our product, which was the flagship product, but then we could also offer other things. And we got into natural stone, stucco, brick, and a lot of other things. And so, I mean, long story short, we went through, we faced a number of obstacles along the way, and we'd overcome them. But I had moved to Arizona. We were looking at doing an expansion, doing some acquisitions here, and COVID hit, and our investor backed out, thinking real estate was going to crash. Hindsight now. And then also with all the restrictions and shutdowns they implemented on us in Canada, where a lot of our business was, it really just halted everything. And so we did end up, during COVID, we had to shut things down.
So now you're shutting things down, and that's always extra frustrating when it's hey, nothing really to do with not running the business well or not having a good customer base, and it was outside your control, and yet you still have to deal with reality. You still have to face the issues and decide what you're going to do. So now at that point, had you started doing coaching? Because I know you kind of shifted over, focused on coaching. Was that a side hustle, an interest, a idea that you were maybe going to do sometime in the future? Or kind of walk us through as you're now shutting that down or compounding the question, which I know is unfair. If you were to, as you're shutting it down, was the intent to shut it down for good, or was the hope to open it back up, or kind of walk us through a little bit of that?
Well, so a couple things. I mean, throughout the whole process of starting this company back in 2005, at the time I was also doing a lot of real estate. I had some apartments, some rental properties, a mini storage facility. So between that and starting this company and some other things I had done, I had the opportunity quite often to mentor people and help people along on their journey. And it's something I loved. And so I had always done the coaching on and off a little bit, but it was the last few years before we ended up shutting that company down, I had some really good guys running it. And it took a lot of the day-to-day stuff off my plate. And so it gave me an opportunity to start doing some of the coaching as more of a side hustle, really. But I was doing that, and a lot of it was, I had got some certifications and gone through some programs, but a lot of it came down to experience. I had been through a lot of different experiences through my different businesses, and specifically the manufacturing business, that I was able to help a lot of people understand what they needed to help in their entrepreneurial journeys. And so I was already doing that. But it was, it all kind of just morphed into one thing. But when we did shut it down, it wasn't something, let's shut down and then see how things come together after COVID. We had grown to a size and commitment in a lot of things that it was a hard decision, because shutting down was the final decision. Like it wasn't going to revamp, because there was a lot of things we had to deal with in that shutdown. In fact, I still am. Um, but yeah, so it was a final decision, which, like I said, was tough, because we did have so many, whether it was distributors, customers, people that worked with us, so many great people involved in the business, that it was hard. But fortunately, there's a lot of those relationships that have continued. I'm doing business with some of the former people that I did business with, just in different forms now. So it was tough.
No, I'm sure that is. And, it's you never set out starting in business thinking, hey, I'm going to shut this down and go through all this hard stuff. And yet, you have to roll with what's comes at you, and figure out how to navigate through it. And so now you're shutting all this down. You're saying, okay, it's going to be a final shutdown. It's still a pain. You're still having to deal with it. And yet, nonetheless, it's, the decision that had to be made. Now, how did you kind of figure out? Because now you mentioned you got into coaching, but was that something that, again, were you already doing coaching, was expanding it and building it out? Or was it something where, hey, I've kind of dabbled with it, and now I'm going to really put a full focus on it? Or kind of what made you decide, okay, now coaching is really going to be where I'm going to, kind of center or focus on going forward?
Yeah. So like I said, I guess you could say, dabbling in it, doing some of it. And it was just something I loved to do, working. Even when I was in the bank, I was a lender to entrepreneurs. So I got to spend my time with entrepreneurs, coaching them from the financial aspect. So coaching was something I was loving. And so when we made this decision that we had to shut it down, it was just kind of a easy transition, saying, what, I'm already doing some of this. It's time to say, let's take this to another level, because this is going to be my full-time part of it now.
No, makes sense. So now you say, okay, full time, this is where I'm going, shutting the other business down. Now, as you get into coaching kind of full time, and you've, had some of that experience or background already, how did it go? Was it something that, hey, it was, you loved it and enjoyed it and took off like a rocket ship and money rained down from the sky? It was, hey, this is teetering on the bankruptcy and I don't know how I'm going to pay myself, or somewhere in the middle? Or kind of walk us through, as you're shifting that to the full-time focus, how it went?
Well, one of the things that I did right at the beginning was, I love mastermind groups, and I'd done virtual ones. And before virtual became so common during COVID, it was something that we still could do with Skype and whatnot. But when I was going all in, I was like, what, I'm going to have a great mastermind. I'm going to do a live one here in Arizona. I'm sure it'll sell out immediately, right? And I had a lot of great feedback on it, a lot of people interested in it. And day of, I had 4 people. And it was, leading up to it, it's like, do I just cancel it? But one of them was flying in. I already knew that person was flying in, had everything booked. And I thought, what? I was expecting 30, 40 people. I've got 4. I'm going to go for it. And so I did that. For 4 people, it was a great event. It was obviously disappointing to me that there's only 4, but that turned into one of them turning into a client. And then it just kind of, no, it wasn't an overnight explosion by any means, but it gave me the opportunity to start doing things, picking up clients. And, the cool part is, I was able to pick up a lot of clients in a ton of different industries. And so seeing how people are doing things in different industries and being able to help them, but also seeing how much business is the same regardless of what industry you're in. So it's been a really rewarding thing to be able to do that. And the coaching aspect of it has morphed a lot, from what's offered, from the one-on-ones to now doing some of the more on the coaching side, tied in with masterminds, accountability groups, stuff like that. So it's been an opportunity to really grow with my clients and really figure out what fits them the best.
Well, that's awesome. Sounds like it's been a a great opportunity. Now, kind of walk us through. So you start out, we only have 4 people, and hey, you know what? 4 more people than you started out with, and if one turns into a client, that's pretty good batting average, and it gives you a place to start. Now you start out and you do that. How did you, or from that, you have the one client that, you know, or person, or one person that turns into a client. But how did you continue to grow and expand that? In other words, you know, some people would have said, awesome, I've got 4 people. That's 4 more than I had. And others are going to say, well, that's demoralizing. I thought I would have a lot more interest and a lot more traction to start out. So kind of as now you're having that as the initial stage that's set to kick things off. How did you kind of go about continuing to grow and expand and bring on new clients and kind of build out the business?
Yeah, you know what, fortunately, some of it started coming through referrals, but I just thought, you know what, this is something I want to do. I'm committed to it, and I just need to be able to find the right clients, and I need them to know who I am and what I do. And so one of the things that I did at that time, and I can't even remember exactly when I started, but I was listening to Russell Brunson talk once, and he talked about, you know, as someone that coaches, as someone that presents, you've really got to find your own voice. And he challenged me to publish daily, whether it was a blog, whether it was a podcast, whatever it was. And so at that time, I decided to do it in the form of a podcast. And I started doing a daily podcast 5 days a week. And I just committed to it and focused on the entrepreneurial journey, the things I was coaching in and whatnot. And I ended up going for about 800 episodes. I did that. And it was a cool experience because I had to stay on my toes. I had to know what I was going to talk about every day. So it was keeping me informed in the things that I wanted to be focused on, but it also gave me the opportunity to get some exposure and meet a lot of people through that avenue that heard the podcast, started listening to it, and thought, you know what, I want this guy to coach me. And so they would reach out to me that way.
Oh, that's awesome. So that's a pretty good schedule to keep a good amount of content going. But it sounds like it was a great opportunity and worked out well for you. So now catch us up a little bit, just kind of fast forwarding. So that's kind of the founding. Where's the business at today, and kind of where's it headed, and what are you doing?
Yeah, so still doing some one-on-one coaching. One of the things that I've implemented that has been really rewarding are my accountability groups, which are mostly with my existing clients. But doing that, I've created a membership area. I call it the Entrepreneur Coaching Group, where a lot of the people in there aren't the people that want full-time one-on-one coaching, but they want the training that I've created in this membership area. Plus we have regular group calls where we're masterminding and putting people in the hot seat and really just helping each other as a group. So we've got that. I've also, you know, looking at a different aspect of my life, I've been involved in sports all my life. You know, I rodeoed professionally. I've coached basketball for 20 years. And so that's always been a big part. And when I really started studying mindset for the entrepreneurial side of things, it really helped me as a basketball coach as well. And it was something that I always obviously had to play with when I rodeoed. Well, I've also teamed up with a mental performance coach, a friend of mine in North Carolina, and we created a program called the Confident Athlete Program. So besides the coaching, I work with entrepreneurs, we have this coaching program, and it's an online program, just like my entrepreneur program, where we've got all this confidence and mental strength training in this program. Plus we do group coaching calls as well. And so between still doing real estate, I ended up actually partnering up with a friend of mine that I grew up with, that we'd kind of both gone our separate ways, and he ended up in Utah and I'm here in Arizona. And he had continued through his real estate journey and knew that I had been involved in real estate, got back involved with him, helping him in a few of his things. And now I'm helping with his coaching program and a lot of things like that. So really doing a lot of things that I love, working with entrepreneurs, working in real estate, and working with athletes.
Well, that sounds like a pretty good place to be, and or should be a fun time doing it. So that's awesome. So Well, now as we've reached kind of the end of the podcast, I always like to wrap up with the one question. So we'll jump to that now. So the question I like to ask is, so when you're in a business, you can always look back, and hindsight's always 2020, but there are always decisions that you would make differently or things that you might have done differently had you known what you know today. And so if you're to be able to go back to the early days of your business, what would be the one decision you'd make differently?
Well, in hindsight, telling that story where I am, there's quite a few decisions I'd make differently. But probably at some of the points, having the attitude that failure isn't an option. There is times running that business that I had the attitude that failure is not an option. And what I mean by that is when we started going through some tough times, I went, and not saying this is a bad thing, but I doubled down where at the time I probably should have said, no, read the writing on the wall. And between myself, my investors and stuff, trying to get through that hump when, and I think in hindsight, the writing was on the wall, cost us all a lot more. And I think if we would have taken things at that time and said, you know what, we've got to end things here and then start it over, then it would have been a better outcome for all of us. So sometimes failure is the option you've got to consider.
Well, I think that's a great thing, that a decision you can make differently, and yet one that's always helpful in hindsight, and yet it's always a harder one to make at the time. So certainly a great takeaway. So now with that, as we are wrapping up the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Absolutely. My email is jeff@jeffheggie.com. My website's jeffheggie.com. The entrepreneur coaching group is coachheggie.com/entrepreneur. And the Confident Athlete program is confidentathleteprogram.com/membership. And I'm on all social media. Jeff Heggie Coaching on Instagram is where I'm most active. But yeah, love to talk to anyone.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, make a connection, support a great business. If nothing else, make a new best friend. So with that, thank you again, Jeff, for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners that are out there, if you can help us to share these founding journeys with even more startups and small businesses to help them along their journey to success, you can just go to go click share, subscribe, and leave us a review. Helps us reach even more startups and small businesses. And on that note, if you ever need help with your startup, your small business with patents or trademarks or anything else, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Well, thank you again, Jeff, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thanks, Devin.